All right. Hello, everyone. Are we live? We are live. Perfect. Welcome to How to Land Your Next Writing Assignment from Story Idea to Perfect Pitch. As we are kind of waiting, letting people trickle in to our event here, please let us know right in the comments, right in the chat, where are you tuning in from? Have you written a pitch before? Have you specifically pitched to Fodor's Travel? Let us know in the comments while we wait for everyone to get started. Let's see. I am personally tuning in from Florida, and I have pitched Fodor's Travel before. I have worked with our special guest today, so I'm excited to have a chat with her and bring everybody in. Let's see, we have somebody from Bangkok, very cool. Los Angeles, Colorado. You haven't pitched yet and you want to learn the best practices. That is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll be hitting on all of those things. We have someone from Berkeley. Very nice. You've never done a pitch, just beginning. Someone from Michigan, pitched a few times before with no success. That is totally normal. As a freelance writer, I've had a lot of no's before I got my first few yeses. So totally normal. We have a hello from DC, from Cusco, Peru. Very nice. And hello from Seattle. Hi, Tess. You haven't pitched publications and you are excited to learn more. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So I am super excited. I think we can go ahead and get started. Before we jump into all of the materials for today and our conversation with our special guest, let me introduce myself. I've met a few people from the wonderful community, but for those of you who don't know, my name is Jessica Poitvien. I'm a freelance travel writer and content creator with more than a decade of experience. I have bylines in travel and leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, Fodor's Travel, and more. And when I'm not traveling or writing, you can find me baking, binging my favorite series, and exploring South Florida, which is my current home base. And let me also tell you all a little bit about Wonderful in case you haven't heard about Wonderful before. Welcome. We're happy to have you here. We are a community of thousands of women travelers and travel content creators based all around the world. And our goal is to help make travel better for women worldwide. You can catch us in over 50 cities where we're regularly hosting local events, and we have an enormous online network so you can tap into the sisterhood wherever you are in the world during your travels. And because Wonderful itself started as a blog in 2009, we spend a lot of time helping content creators hone the tools of their own craft, and we help businesses tell meaningful travel stories using our creator network. You might have heard of WITS. We actually just had our travel creator summit in Puerto Rico. It is definitely not something that you want to miss, and it brings hundreds of talented creators and industry marketers together every year. We're all about opening the world up and lifting barriers for women, which is why we love hosting free and open online events just like this one to help you all grow. So without further ado, now that you all know a little bit more about Wonderful, I'd like to introduce our guest, Eva Morreale. She is the Fodor's assignments editor. Her work has previously appeared in Jezebel, The Hairpin, Splinter, and Believer magazine. A Jersey girl, cheese enthusiast, and Real Housewives addict, when not out of office on assignment, she can be found gallivanting across her adopted hometown of Los Angeles. Eva, it is wonderful to have you. Thank you for joining us.
It's wonderful to be here.
Like what you did there.
It was right there. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure and delight.
Now, I know you have a lot of excellent information to give to these people, and we are all very excited and eager to learn from you. So shall we jump right in?
Yes, let's jump in. I'm excited to chat.
All right, perfect. So everybody wants to know, what pitching, right? Story ideas, pitching, all of these things. It seems like there's a veil of mystery sometimes when it comes to breaking into the travel industry. But I kind of want to go step by step, starting with just how do you get good ideas, right? Not every trip, not every vacation is necessarily going to lend itself to writing an article for a publication like Fodor's Travel, for example. So how can we tell the difference between a story that is great for friends and family versus something that is great for a publication?
Yeah, I think there's a type of pitch we get a lot, and I think a lot of pitches kind of fall into this category. So a thing I've kind of realized, and it's true for myself as well, because my background's in entertainment. I kind of fell into travel writing. A lot of people are greener and have begun traveling, not necessarily like they're new to traveling. So everything's exciting for them. Everything blows their mind, which I agree with. I go to a new place and I'm like, what? This is wild to me. So I think a lot of people end up pitching eat, pray, love type stories. And whether it's intentional, like I went here to, experience this feeling of, euphoria, joy, wonder, etc. Or I went here and I didn't realize that I'd feel this, and the floodgates kind of emotionally open, and it comes across that way in the pitch. And it's exciting for yourself, but then if you tried to write that story, a reader would read it and be like, well, what am I getting? I'm glad you had a great time. Like, there's no like connective tissue there. It's just like, it was great for you. It's kind of like, I also sometimes call those kinds of pitches what I did on my summer vacation, where it's just like, and again, this is like no knock on these experiences for people. Like, people should travel and be out there and having these wonderful experiences, but it comes across as just like, I did this and then I saw this and then I saw that and it was amazing. So if you think you could equate the basic gist of your pitch to that, then it might not be a go, or it probably isn't a go. I'd also say, like, if it's anecdotal and you just tell it to family and friends, then it's probably not like the best pitch. I would also shop around and do some research. If it's some like, there's an entire industry around sleep. I don't know if people are coming across this right now, but hotels are getting in on it by offering these like really unique sleep packages or these really unique spa packages to give you the best sleep of your life. We've gotten dozens of pitches about it, and we've already written about it. So, think about the place you're pitching to and just simply do a Google search. You'd be surprised like how often people neglect to do it. And we read the pitch and we're like, we did this 2 weeks ago. We did this a month ago. We did this last year. We've been talking about this for a long time. We updated this article with more examples, earlier this year, blah, 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 blah. So I would be very intentional. And believe me, when I was freelancing, I cross pitched, which you should be doing, but make sure it's tailored for that publication too. So I touched on a few different things, but it's kind of like a sweet spot and a secret sauce. You have to do some background research to make sure it actually works, but you have to like really be self-critical a little bit and think about like, is this exciting for me or is this exciting for everyone? And then the next step, I think from there, and I'll kind of wrap up the answer with this, is that when you pitch it, you have to seem excited too. The amount of times people have pitched us and it's something they want to talk about, and I'm like, oh, you're not selling me, so why would I say yes to this pitch? If that makes sense. Like, if you write like a couple of sentences and I haven't like really understood what you're talking about or what you're trying to say and why it's a thing or why it's exciting, then I would devote an entire piece to it, right? So I think those are some gut checks and some steps you can take to assure that your pitch is like a banger, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing, because I know when I first started out blogging and started out freelance writing, because
Mhm.
there are certainly lots of personal stories out there, right,
Mm.
that get turned into these great travel pieces. I typically like to look at it as personal yet informative. Like maybe I'm using
Mm.
my personal experience, but it's lending itself to teaching the reader something so that it's not just me bragging about my great, vacation.
Yes.
It's actually going to do something for the reader. Would you say that that's correct? Is that also what you mean when you're saying
Absolutely.
that it's not just, about you?
Yeah, like I always encourage writers to like to remove the personal from it. Like I want voice, I want style, because otherwise why not just have, the same person write every article? Why not have a robot? Ugh, uh AI is a whole conversation too, right? The piece, right? But yeah, I want style, I want voice, I want someone's unique perspective. People have different beats, people have different areas of expertise. So that is all extremely important in a piece. But what isn't is like kind of centering yourself and making yourself like this narrator. Um, we don't necessarily need that. We need like
Mhm.
your authority, which you're giving because you've done this specific thing, inserted in a way that's like, here's how you can do it too. I did this thing. And then it can even be in the intro. It can be dispersed throughout with your humor. It could be, blah, 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 blah. But you're the authority in this situation. Think of yourself as like the expert. Like, I did this thing. Here's what I want to convey, really. Because ultimately, you don't want to convey, like, your soul was lit on fire by blah, blah, blah. But you want people to know the restrictions and guidelines when they go to this Buddhist temple, right? So, less insertion of yourself and more what we need to glean from this article. Like, what is going to be the takeaway? I think
Mhm.
two things you can think about when you're pitching or thinking about, or not even ready for the pitch. If you're like, is this a thing? What would the headline be? And after someone scrolled through the article and read the entire thing, what did they glean from this?
Mhm.
And I'm also saying I think it's easy to get your footing with serviceable stories. Like the if you're newer, I think it's much easier to start with like a slideshow or start with a basic breakdown of a place, or start with a do this, not this, or start with a here's breaking TSA news, blah, 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 that will affect Black travelers, that will affect disabled travelers, something like that, because it is easier to just report and inform and then get into the nitty gritty stuff. Unless you do have a background in, say, social justice, or a background in social work, or a background in disability, and you can tell more nuanced stories on a bigger scale, I'd say serviceable stuff is easy pickings and ready to go and
Mhm.
timely always. So that might be a good place to start, of getting your brain into that space, versus I just got back from Italy and I tried the best local meat or whatever.
No, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think a lot of times when people think about travel writing, they think about that narrative style. They think about
Mhm.
personal experience writing, which we all love to do, but who doesn't? But there's so many different types of
Mhm.
travel writing. Like you said, you can write those service pieces that are helping the reader, or more, it's a lower stakes, let's say, for an
Yes.
editor to take a chance on a new writer
Yes.
on a listicle about things to do in XYZ place. Or if you are an expert in a location that you've been living for a long time, it's easy to position yourself, like you said, as authority, and not have to necessarily do the narrative style writing
Mhm,
until
mhm.
you kind of build a little bit more trust with the editor. So
Exactly. And
I,
that's so true. I'm glad you touched on that too, of like building trust. Like, It's not that I want to give people the moon, the stars, a bajillion dollars. I if that
A
were
billion?
something just cool, I know, not no billionaires allowed. If I could grab all of that out of my pocket and throw it at the person, absolutely. But yeah, you do want to build trust, and out of that gets born some of the like the best things, where we're like, oh, such and such is like a regular, they're ready, we're ready to, like, blah blah blah. We were even talking about someone at our earlier pitch meeting this week where we were like, we're ready to give them like bigger stories because they're just so solid. So it is a relationship. It is about building trust, and that's one of the ways you can establish and do that.
So we do have a question in the comments that I will insert it here because I think it's perfect. So it says, you mentioned using slideshows. What exactly are you referring to? How do you pitch a slideshow?
Yeah, so just say it, I envision it as a slideshow. Some things are articles with subheads, some things are slideshows. So generally for us, the way our slideshows work is if you can talk about more than 8 examples of something, it might be well suited as a slideshow. And sometimes during the editorial process, that gets nagged and we turn it back into an article just based on what the tips end up being or what the slides end up being, whatever. But the way to pitch a slideshow is just say, hey, that I envision this as a slideshow. So things that could work well as a slideshow are like, we have a writer, I keep using her as an example lately, but she's great and a good example of this sort of thing. We have a writer, Barbara No Kennedy, and a story she did maybe a few months ago was she's based in DC, I want to say, or Virginia. And she had, through press trips and other experiences, gone to all these places that were central to the civil rights movement, but they were restaurants that fed people involved and marching and protesting amidst the civil rights movement. So she was like, for Black History Month, I think this would be a perfect slideshow story. Can I round up all of these places and give a brief history about them? So I'd say look at slideshows as like a way to corral a group of information. It could be locations, it could be countries, it could be cities, it could be tips, it could be things to pack. But if you can think of like one that's I think on the homepage of the site right now that we came up with was, let's have somebody write, everybody's going to be in Europe this summer, right? How are you going to stay cool? Like a culture shock for people from America going to Europe for the first time, second time, third time, is that they often don't ice their drinks. And there's often not air conditioning. So you're walking around all day and it's hot. How are you going to stay cool? So that's a great slideshow. It's very serviceable, but it's packed with like fun, helpful information, and it's very timely. So if you think of all those factors and then all of that information can be corralled in one way, it's probably a great case for a slideshow. So usually the way that pitch breakdown works is, hey, I want to do a slideshow about this. Here's why it's relevant. And then give us like 3 or 4 examples so we know you're on the right track. Because the next question, if we like the idea and you haven't given us any examples, we're going to ask you for some examples. So just save yourself
Get out of the way. Yeah.
Get it out of the way. And especially it's going to build that trust and let us know what you're talking about from the jump.
And I think too, with we're using the word slideshows, but perhaps people are more familiar with roundups or listicles, and the concept is basically the same, whether it's in a slideshow format. I think someone, Heather, I believe, asked that. Yes, Heather Jasper asked that in the comments. There are a lot of publications that do this kind of formatting, and it is an excellent way to kind of break in, and it doesn't necessarily have to be. I think a lot of times people get caught up with pitching thinking that they need to reinvent the wheel. And sometimes it doesn't have to be as complicated as that. Like you mentioned, these culture shocks to know for when you go to Europe, or I'll plug a piece that I wrote for Fodors about about giving people a diverse look at van life, because in 2020, van life was all over Instagram, and
Yes.
it was constantly one specific prototype of people that was being showcased. And so
Yes.
I said, I want to show a more diverse look at van life through these different influencers. And that's exactly, I sent in my pitch. I said, this is the idea, this is why it's relevant, and here are 3 accounts of people that we could feature. And
Yes.
that turned into a slideshow. So I think that's a very good point about how it's slideshows, listicles, roundups, that sort of thing are a great way to break into a publication. But so let's say people do, you've done that side, right? You're
Mhm.
trying to build your relationship with a certain publication, with an editor, and now you want to get into those deeper stories, but you're having trouble finding them, whether they're about your personal travels or about, something else. What do you have any tips on how to extract story ideas from your travels or from things that you're seeing around you? Any tips on idea generation in general?
Yeah, I see someone asked about, I think it's Wanda from Black Woman Travel, which is awesome. Hi, Wanda. I think some of our editors have said it's the story you tell in a bar, like over drinks with friends, is like the ooh story. And for me, it's not that. Not that I'm not telling stories to my friends in the bars about my travel. I feel like that can often be like been there, done that sometimes. Because you'd be surprised, like travel is this highly unique experience and different for every person, but some things just run true, especially if it's a common place to go, right? So for me, I often like to think of like the intersection of travel and different, topics in the world, or things going on that are relevant. We are assigning out a story about like the billionaires that it's loosely tied to the billionaires that lost their lives
Yeah.
on the Titanic
Merciful.
expedition. But the larger story there is about this new phenomenon that's emerging of adventure travel, and like the urge to go to Everest, and like why do people feel the need to conquer these wonders of the world in a sense? Like why do you need to see the top of Everest? Just let Everest be Everest. Why, like, what is it part of the human condition? Specifically, let's be real, white men. What is the obsession with uh needing to go and see these types of things? And that is a travel story, right?
Mhm.
But like on a lighter note, what's also a travel story is I get a lot of ideas from TikTok, honestly, and a lot of people earlier this year were like, here's a hack for seeing Beyonce, because Beyonce is going to be too expensive in the States. Go see a big concert overseas, and you get a trip out of it, and your flight's probably going to be less expensive than the concert ticket alone was in the States. So that's why there was this really beautiful phenomenon of like Black women going to Paris for the first time and then getting to see Beyonce, and doing it on a budget. So, and that's a travel story, right? So I think if you want to talk about like big picture stories, think about the big picture, open up your world. And it could be, I just gave 2 examples. One was, fun and like a hacky story ultimately, but it's ultimately about Beyonce and the intersection of travel. And then one is about like, why are billionaires and the intersection of travel. So there's all of these beautiful, unique stories you could be telling that you can, insert yourself in. I did end up assigning the Beyonce story, and it did really well. And the author included her own experience of like going in the Ticketmaster line and being like, "What?" And hearing about like, I should buy tickets overseas. Let me buy tickets overseas. So there's ways you can insert yourself. But I think open up your world. And that's when really unique, beautiful stories start to come. Heather Jasper, who's in the chat right now, based on her unique experiences in Peru, has pitched us and gotten a number of commissions based on things that she's done, seen, experienced. One of her stories about the alpaca ladies was phenomenal. And that's based on something she experienced and saw and got curious about
Mm-hmm.
in her day to day. So I think, yeah, opening up your world and like really being curious about things is the way these unique big picture
Ideas.
stories
Mhm.
emerge. Yeah.
And I like what you said about Heather specifically. Shout out to Heather. Hello. Because I think a lot of times writers get too caught up in too big of a picture sometimes. They
Mm.
said, I just spent 3 weeks in Italy. I want to write about all of Italy or all of Peru or all, but sometimes it's about honing in on that one particular element that was very unique or interesting about that trip and just
Yeah.
focusing on there and digging a little bit deeper on that one element.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a question earlier about, getting ideas for serviceable pieces. And I think it ties in with idea generation. But a
Absolutely.
lot of times, the service pieces that I get, I am just simply thinking about problems that I have. And I said, if I have this problem, somebody else is bound to also have this problem. How can I turn this into a story? So
Mm.
I recently wrote a story, for example, about finding good sunscreen for melanated skin because
Mm.
it's really hard for Black women or anybody with a little extra melanin to find good
Without a
sunscreen.
white cast. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't leave a white cast. And so it was, summer was coming up, even though we should be wearing sunscreen all year. Uh, but people pay more attention to that in the summer. So I think a lot of idea generation, just kind of tying in these different ideas, comes from paying attention to your surroundings, paying attention to the conversations that you have with people. I know a writer who wrote a whole story about peeing in the shower because apparently there are benefits to it. I don't know. This story came from one day she was peeing in the shower and she wondered,
Wow.
there must be something to
Yes.
this.
And you were curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yes.
You never
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
just as an encouragement for the people, watching, attending with us here today, once you start, you will see how the ball keeps rolling. Like once you start pitching, once you start working that muscle, you will see how much easier it gets to start creating those ideas. And when you are reading the publications that you want to be published in, you'll also start understanding their style, understanding what they're looking for, and your brain will almost start thinking in those patterns so that you can get
Yes.
pieces that are good
That
for those
is
other
so
publications.
true. If you are like, if you're frustrated at all, or like, oh, this idea is once it clicks, boom, 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 you're gonna be able to just the ideas are just going to start flowing. And if you wake up in the middle of the night, if you're that person like me that's like, oh God, I have an idea, like type it down immediately, write it down, get it down. Even if it's just the inkling of an idea, give yourself something to expand off of, because you're exactly right. It is just a mind frame that you get into with pitches and story ideas. It happens to me too. And then we just we throw it at someone. But
Yeah.
if you can definitely get your brain just in that headspace where your ideas are just starting to churn. It's a phenomenon. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a thing.
I don't know. It's
It's
definitely
writer brain. Yeah.
writer brain, exactly. So once you have, we've discussed kind of the idea generation, getting that strong idea. Besides having a strong, convincing idea, what are other key elements that people should include in a pitch?
So my battery's gonna die. I might have to run and grab my charger really quick, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But
I can keep people entertained if you have to.
Before I do, I'm just running into my other room, my office. Before I run, I would say you can actually pull this up too if it's easier on my Twitter, which is slowly falling to rest because obvious reasons. The pin tweet is exactly how to pitch. And this works. This is a format that works for any publication, not just ours. This is one I've used in the past. That's one I developed based on talking to other writers, coming up with like a gist of a formula. But I'd say the basic breakdown, if you don't have this tweet in front of you, it's a thread and it has all the information, is your subject line should be pitch and then what you title the piece. Don't send me Paris idea. Don't send me I've been thinking about. Don't say anything other than what the title of it is, because how else am I going to know? Why else am I enticed to open the email, right? And then in your in the body of the email, you're going to give me the who, what, where, when, why, and like essentially why I'm excited about it, why you're excited about it, why it's a relevant story to tell. Give me a brief bio of like who you are, why you're the person to tell it. If you're a sommelier and the story's about wine, or if your parents were sommelier, like throw that information in there. That's relevant. And then tie it up with a nice little bow. Keep it brief. Don't insert your article already in there. Don't only write 2 lines. There's a lot of people lately who do that. They give me 2 sentences and I'm like, why am I giving you this article? And yeah, definitely don't pre-write the article. So some misinformation, someone's mom got out there and was like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just write them the whole article and then they'll have to take it. Don't do that. Do not do that. And I will be right back in the meantime.
All right. And I will give my own tips. So why I think it is I've been doing this for a while. So why I think it's really important not to write the whole article before you get an assignment is because the editor might actually want to tweak. They might like your idea, but want to put a little tweak on it. So if you just spent all this time writing an article and then the editor says, oh, I like this, but I actually want you to, maybe shift it a little bit more, focus this way or that way, then you just wasted your time. Also, I always think, why now? Why you, right? Why should you be the one to write this story? If you have an element, like you're a sommelier writing a story about wine, that's a really good one. Why now? It doesn't necessarily need to be a big event that's happening. It could be like the example I gave, summer's coming up. You need sunscreen. Here you go. That's the why now. And why this story. You have to make sure that you convey why should the editor want to write or want to work with you on this story.
Absolutely.
How'd I do, Eva?
Very good. Yeah, I was ducking under my table and was like, "This is good." Yeah.
So
yes,
we have a lot of writers here who are newer. Either they haven't had any luck pitching or getting pitches accepted yet, or perhaps they've only gotten 1 or 2 and they're still, trying to get their feet wet. Do you have any advice for new writers, perhaps ones that do not have published clips, and how they can, build trust and also, get their pitches accepted?
Yes. I'm giving myself like a primer so I can see if I can weave in any additional answers to like get people's questions answered quickly. Yeah. How can you get essentially is the question, how can you get your pitch accepted?
Especially for newer writers, I think, something that I've run into is, writers saying, how do I show this editor that I can write if I haven't been published yet? It's like a kind of thing.
I highly recommend having a newsletter. It's a commitment, but it's your spot to just write about whatever you want. It should have some focus. And obviously, there's a writer we have that also has a former background in entertainment. Mara, please forgive me in advance because I always pronounce your name incorrectly in my head. I tell myself I'm going to pronounce it correctly, and then I say the wrong pronunciation. And now I can't even remember if it's Mara or Mara Eakin. But she's fabulous and extremely talented. Please forgive me, Mara, if you hear this or it goes around. but she's a really talented writer. She writes a lot from the perspective of parenthood, and she has a new newsletter. I'm plugging her newsletter. She has a new newsletter called Mom Jeans, and in it she talks about like the experience of being a mom, and you know the relevance that happens or the intersection of like travel and her life. And it's just like a really fresh, funny perspective. But if she were a newer writer and she was like, hey, I don't have any clips to show you, but here's my newsletter, and I've talked about this topic before, which gave me the idea for this story, we would be like, oh my God, that's amazing. College, right? Like people that are straight out of college are still in college. We've published several times as well. And they haven't said necessarily, like they haven't given us one of their papers to read, but they've been like, this is the subject of my thesis, or I'm getting my master's in this. So this is why I'm really passionate or excited about it. If there's other people that don't necessarily fit into those situations or don't have the time to write a newsletter, which is a commitment, I completely understand. I would just say, hey, I'm green, but I'm well versed on the subject because XYZ. Like you don't have to straight up say like, I have no experience. Don't get down on yourself and assume, you know, that you can't. And this all ties back to this community, right? A lot of women automatically from the jump count themselves out because they don't fit all the requirements for something. Whereas you look at job applications, men apply for whatever they want. Women are like, do I have
meet every bullet point?
I know.
Yeah.
Should I? And then close the window and talk themselves out of it. So you don't have to do that with pitching, especially. The worst we can say is no. We're not going to reply and say, you suck, here's why, ever. So no publication's going to do that. So put yourself out there, and you don't have to write this, you know, long story about, I really want to, blah, 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 blah. Just say, here's, you know, where I'm at, and here's why I'm the person. So if you're pitching a story, think about, especially we're going back to that, you know, point we were talking about of building trust. Make sure your earlier pitches are subjects you're really well versed in, you're really knowledgeable about, you're really excited about, because that shows through in the writing. So those would be my specific tips.
Perfect. And that's when you lean on those other elements, right? Like you said, if you don't have necessarily the strongest clips, but if it's a topic that you're so well versed on, of course the sommelier could write about wine, you know?
Exactly.
It helps your case.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm going to grab some questions that look like they're relevant to this specific bit we're talking about. Is it okay to use your Muckrack profile link and say, here you can find yeah, absolutely. In your like little wrap up, if you're like, hey, you can see my previous work at blah, blah, blah. What I used to do is I'd be like, my previous work was at Jezebel here. And when I put Jezebel, I'd put the link to that specific article. That's common too. Let me see. Ooh, hi.
I think along those lines too, Eva, I just want to say, you know, make sure that you make it very clear from the beginning of your email that you are a writer with a pitch, because editors get lots of emails from readers. So say right off the bat, and even if you've never published anything before, you are still a writer. So don't get down on yourself. Say, I am XYZ, you know, a writer with a pitch about ABC. And then you get into it, because editors need to know within 0.5 seconds.
Yes. We're not like, I like to read aloud. So I'm giving away my secrets, but I like to read things out loud. But also make sure you read your email out loud. Because if I'm reading it out loud and I'm like, what, you know, like, what is happening in this email? If you're using all sorts of, like, you'd be surprised how many people highlight and add red and bold things and underline it. I don't need all that. I'm getting lost in the sauce here. So keep it clean and concise, and, you know, keep your points. Boom, 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 boom. There's two questions I want to get to that are relevant to specifics of a pitch. What are things from Farha, what are things you look for in a writer after signing them a story to make you want to work with them again? From your pitch and your piece, everything should be tight and concise. Turn in your copy clean and on time, and we're probably going to work with you again. Clean copy on time. If you've gone through your story and your pitch and everything looks like well organized, you took the time to make sure you're fact checked, you're grammatically checked, you're turning it into us as a perfect starting point. There's nothing I need. Like, obviously we edit, and sometimes we work together with writers on edits if they're, if there's more than minor. But make sure it's like in great shape, ready to go for us. I'd say is my biggest tip. And most editors will want to work with you again. They'll be so grateful that something's on time too. I'd say that's a biggie. And then any tips for a catchy headline from Haley? I'd say it depends on the publication you're working at. But if the pitch is good, the headline can always be tweaked. Think of it that way. Certain publications, they only want to open your email if like the headline is great. So this is a good question to ask. Like, for example, someone pitched us a story that was about how in American parks there isn't a sense of quietness, and comparing cultures like Japan where things, it's respectful to just be quiet, and it is about this whole phenomenon of this specific park in Portland. So it tied together all these ideas, but the headline was a little, not even weak, it was just like true to what the story was, which I'm explaining this to you, and I find that sort of stuff exciting, cultural differences and quietness, and there's all these think pieces about is the noise of gentrification is quietness and blah blah blah. So I thought it would just be a fun clickable headline to be like, this park in Portland wants you to shut the F up. And obviously the F is censored, but that's clickable. Like, so, yeah. And I asked the author if it was okay, and she was like, yeah, that's so funny. So I think if you just think outside the box, like what's happened to headlines in the past 10 years is they've gotten very BuzzFeedy, where they're clickbaity, or I call them Mad Libs headlines, where they're like, this blank did blank blank to support blank. And it's like, oh, if your story's turning into that, then that's a key to like run away from that headline. Get creative. There's ways you can make people click, like this park in Portland wants you to shut the F up, versus a meditation on the quietness of parks in America, like which one are you going to click? So I'd say just do a brain dump. And if you have the idea and you're like, well, what is the essence of the story? Just start writing potential headlines, and some options will come to you. So put it in your subject line and then be like, you could also make this, the headline is what I do.
And also pay attention to the specific publication that you're pitching, because maybe the idea is good for more than one publication, but a Fodor style headline is not the same as a Thrillist headline, which is not Travel and Leisure or Condé Nast. So that also shows that you're paying attention to that publication.
Exactly.
You can write a headline in their style.
Yes.
So something else to think about.
Excellent point. Yes.
So I see we say, how far in advance of a publication date do you recommend pitching for seasonal stories? That's a very good question.
Oh, I'd say the sooner the better, but you don't have to go wild. Like, some people are still pitching us full on summer stories, and like the summer calendars, like it sounds wild, but for us, like, we're trying to get like the last of summer stories in. So You wouldn't pitch like 20 summer activities for blah, blah, blah right now, because it's a little late on that. So like if you wanted to start pitching fall centric stuff or stuff that involves like a specific trip you need to take, then now is the time to do it. So I'd say if it's seasonal, if it's, I'd say here's another thing that loops into that. But I'd say the benchmark is like 3 months if it's specific to a specific season, 2 or 3 months. But don't pitch me something that I could run year round. And what I mean by this is like, don't be like, this is perfect for Pride. We should be telling queer stories all the time. Don't be like, this is perfect for Black History Month. We should be telling Black stories all the time. Don't be like, this is perfect for this. Da, 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 da. You should be those sorts of diverse stories. If they can be talked about at any time, then you don't need to pitch it specifically for that. It can be pitched anytime. A lot of people like to capitalize on niche holidays too. And I'd say don't base pitches around that because there's such a short window of time to get it assigned, commissioned on the site that by the time we do it, we have to get our photo team involved. We need to build the post. A lot of people, I think, like to find like, this is a great story for International Cheese Day. Don't bank on International Cheese Day because the window will go and be done. So I'd say that's another tip with focusing specifically on timeliness. But in terms of specific holidays that are, nationally celebrated or specific season, 2 to 3 months is a good window. And usually what we'll say if it's a little too soon, we'll say, hey, bump this and remind me of it in October or whatever.
Yeah. And if it's for print publication, that window is much, much larger. There are some publications already planning their 2024 calendars. So
yeah, we're doing special projects for 2024 already. And
which sounds wild, but
but you just gotta. It's like the means of publication. Yeah. Should we answer some more questions? I think we've got
I think so.
20 minutes left. So I'm just going to lightning round through some things quickly. If you haven't had your question answered or you're coming up with questions, guys, just feel free to bump or pop them into the chat. So did you put pitch for XYZ in the subject line? No, we don't need to. You're writing them an email, so you don't need to. What are some of your best platforms to publish? How's your newsletters? What do I use? Mine is on Substack. And Substack's great. They've just released some new, you can use it for free, which is, and they've just released some new features. They have like some subscriber rewards. So if you refer someone, like a publication can give you a free subscription. They have an app. It's really easy to work with. It's very much like WordPress. Like it's so user friendly. I know people that have used like MailChimp in the past. If like you have a designer friend and you want to go down that route, I'm not the best person to ask, but I'd say the most common and popular right now is Substack, and it's very user friendly. Hi, Eva, Robin Catalano here. Hi, Robin. What's your ideal length for a pitch? I try to keep them under 250 words, but some pubs like shorter and some like longer. I'd say gauge, based on the publication. For us, I think 250 is great. And you can even, break some of that stuff into bullet points too. But I think like an intro, a brief intro about yourself, the bulk of it should be what the pitch is and what the pitch is about, and then hyperlink either, like we mentioned earlier, your muck rack, or hyperlink your previous work, and that's a good way to do it. But I'd say you would kind of learn based on who you're pitching to, like what they like. So I'd say it's a little bit of trial and error, but I'd say 250 is good for kind of everyone. Jeff, do you trust AI in your process? To what extent? No. We haven't incorporated AI into any of our editorial process, and we don't. At this point, it's not that it gives us the heebie-jeebies, but don't write your article with AI. It's lazy. Um, open-ended questions that, cut and dry right now. I can say AI is not involved in any of our process.
And there are some publications specifically sending out warning emails to their writers, like, if you
yes,
use AI, you will never work with us again. So
yes.
definitely, it's not worth the
It's
risk.
not worth it. No AI. What are some of the best platforms to? Oh, wait, Reddit. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Sorry, Farah. Do you prefer the story idea in the beginning of the pitch, followed by our introduction, past pubs later? The order of operations is all on my Twitter. So literally just read that thread. If you have specifics about how it should look, my Twitter is, can I write in the chat? Am I allowed to write in the chat? I got to figure it out. I'm having some technical difficulties over here myself, but it's literally is my Twitter handle, but instead of the Y being a Y, it's an E. So it's a little pun on my name, but it's literally, and it's the pin tweet. So you can expand it and all of those details are there. Juan, did you have any rituals around sitting down to write? No, I'm a little all over the place. So for me, myself, like when I'm in the mood, when I'm in the headspace, that's when it comes to me. But one thing, I'm plugging all sorts of apps and stuff right now, but one thing that has really helped me is this app called Structured. And I'll use this Monday, but I just like the way it looks, and you can kind of tick off tasks, and it's very user friendly, and unfortunately it's very Apple friendly. I can't speak to Android users, but you can plug in all of the things you want to accomplish in a day. And I'm very much I guess you could say ritualistic person, but I'm a ticker offer. So if I have it blocked off in my calendar and I see something that I need to do, I'm more likely to do it. Whereas if I just write down a to-do list, or I wake up and I'm like, I should do blah, 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 including writing today, it's not going to happen. But that's just my process. I think I know a lot of people who do have a ritual around it, and they're morning pages people. I know a lot of people who have done the artist way. I live in LA. It's like you come here and they give you, a Hollywood map and the artist way your first day here. So I'd say create a ritual around it, especially around pitching. There's some writers I know that they have an entire spreadsheet, and they look at who they followed up with, who they've pitched to, who said yes, who said no. All their deadlines are in there. There's this writer, Kayla Yu, that I know specifically that does that, and she's fabulous. But she's like on it, and she's in a million publications because she's able to stay hyper organized. But not everybody's like that. So I'd say find what works for you. Don't feel like you have to do a spreadsheet. Don't feel like you have to download Structured. Think about your personality and your values and what is important to you, both time-wise and ability-wise, and do that. Don't feel like you have to do any one specific thing, but get in the habit. The habit of writing and of pitching is just a thing you have to do if you want to be in the industry. My Twitter's private now. Let me unprivate my Twitter. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry for promoting it, and it's private. So is there anything to put in the subject line that helps them to open your email, or should it just be the title of your article pitch from Penny? Yeah, it should just be the title, and that should be enough. That's why things hinge on that title a lot. So either if you haven't come up with anything winky or super clickable, then just tell us exactly what we need to know in that subject line. Make sure it says pitch, blah, 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 but really give us and hone in on what the pitch is about if you haven't come up with like the best title yet. Yeah, that's what I'd say. I'm going to unprivate my Twitter. Does anybody have any other questions in the meantime?
We have a question here. It says, do you suggest using your own images or stock photos with slideshows, or does the publication handle the rights of usage?
The publication generally handles that. At least for us, we, straight up say, like, once we commission things, you don't need to worry about photos. Now, what we do ask for is contacts for the photos if it's like niche or specialized. Like, most publications use stock imagery. And if it's something you couldn't find on a stock site, so if it's like, it's an entire article about this specific restaurant and why it's amazing or why it's like a travel crossroads. I'm just coming up with something. Then we're going to need the contact for the restaurant. But if it's something about, California's wine trail, we don't need you to provide photos. Probably the contacts of that specific winery, but we don't need your photos. And you don't need to say, hey, I have, if it is something that's like, we did this story about, like, there's this fire continually burning that's like, they call it like the eighth circle of hell is on earth or something. Like, I can't remember the gist of it, but something like that, like, we need photography for. There's not going to be stock imagery of this giant burning pit. So yeah, stuff like that, I'd say. Or if it involves you, like if it involves you and your family and that's the hinge of the story, yeah, I need your photos, but not something, I don't want to say generic, but not something easily accessible.
And we have another one. What about stories that center remarkable individuals or organizations in destinations? Is there interest in that, or better as listicles?
I think it's a little done to death at this point. And I think that falls into the bucket of Mad Lib stories. This adventure traversed around blah, blah, blah to showcase people that blah, blah, blah can ride motorcycles. Like if it's an interview or if it's like a really cool individual, that's amazing. And I'm so glad they're doing the work they're doing. But the amount of pitches we were getting surrounding like unique individuals or organizations is done to death. And then it makes these subjects, it kind of taints these subjects, but almost makes them seem, trite when it's a done to death type of story. When you can copy paste these stories and say, the same gist of things, like they're a pioneer in their industry, they're diversifying their industry. Okay, like we need to go to the next step with these sorts of pieces. So at least for us, we're good, but they might still work for other travel spaces. I'm not sure if other people are still into those kinds of pitches. So it's worth a try, but for us, no.
What would you say that next step is? Because I agree with, there's definitely a lot of stories of like, this is the first insert marginalized group person to do this in XYZ industry. So what would be the next step? I mean, that's a very good question about.
Yeah. I think, again, get curious, like follow the thread of it. Like if you have a conversation with them on a press trip, or you got to interview them for whatever reason, or what I even get are a lot of PR is like, do you want an interview with such and such? And you're like, they do seem cool, I would take the interview. And then you're like, well, what is the story now? Like they're a pioneer in the industry. Amazing. Like maybe reach out to the people they've affected, that are able to do accessible travel because of them now. Or maybe go to the place that they're well versed in, like that is their wheelhouse that they've affected. Or I'd say just get curious, because I honestly am not quite sure. So I think just follow the thread of them. Like that story is going to begin with an intro that explains their childhood and who they are and how they got into this industry. And then it's going to be a Q&A. And then it's going to be tips for whatever industry they're focused in. And then it's going to wrap up with like, thank goodness they're doing this, right? So what happens after that? It's like that. It's like that juicy thing I talk about with friends sometimes, and has been a thought in the entertainment space about movies specifically, of like with rom-coms, like the couple gets together in the end and then what? You know, we've had this beautiful happy ending. What's going to happen next? Tell us what happens next. And I haven't like kind of followed that crumb trail myself, so I'm not sure, but I think that whatever that is, it's better than this unique person in this specialized industry.
All right, let's see. Margie, I hope I'm saying that correctly, says this has been super helpful. Instead of nervous about throwing my hat in, I feel ready. That is awesome. We're happy to hear that.
Amazing. That is what I want to hear. I hope people feel that way because, you know, it doesn't have to be the scary thing. Like when I was getting started, the thing I always tell myself is the worst people can say is literally just no. So why not? Especially if you think you have a unique or important story to tell, and especially if you want to make this your job, you do it. You know, who says you can't? But yeah, I hope this has been helpful to you guys.
Well, we are hitting on 1 o'clock right now, which is or 1 o'clock, at least our time on the East Coast. So I don't know if we want to do a quick rapid fire. I have a yes or no for you. That's all we can get.
Okay.
Does Fodors accept stories from press trips? Yes or no?
We do. Yes. Yes.
Is LinkedIn a good way to get your articles noticed?
Yes and no. If you have a large following, go for it. But otherwise, don't fall prey to LinkedIn's algorithm.
Okay. And is it okay, yes or no, to pitch to multiple publications the same idea?
Yes, do it. Make sure it's tweaked for the publication's voice and style, but do not wait on any publication, even us, to give you a yes. Shop around. It's like with anything.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Eva, for your time and all of your wisdom. We definitely appreciate it. It seems like everybody got a lot out of this event, so I'm really happy for that. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Be sure to check out Wonderful's calendar of events. We have events like this all the time. And I think this will be recorded so we can watch again. I believe. Don't quote me on that one.
That does sound right.
That does sound right.
And if you guys, I think it's being included with all the information for the conversation. But if you guys want to pitch Fodors, it's pitches@fodors.com. It's really simple. So yes. And I will unprivate my Twitter so you guys can read that thread. I'm very sorry. But thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Eva. We'll see everybody at the next event. Thank you.